All right, folks, so I'm here at the federal courthouse for day one officially of Lil Durk's murder for hire trial. And I'm not going to lie, things got off to an absolutely insane start. It was actually a wild start. No disrespect to the judge, but the judge made just a little bit of an accident. Look, we're only human, but the judge accidentally said something that nearly completely ended the whole proceedings. Like, it was actually crazy. So the judge was kind of introducing everything, reintroducing the charges. The prosecutors had their opportunity to reintroduce to this potential jury what the charges are, what they're going to be facing, everything that's going on with that. And what was really, really crazy is that, during the judge kind of explaining what was going on, he made just a slip of the tongue. It was completely accidental. It wasn't like anything where I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was gonna create any bias, but it was a pretty wild moment. And they basically sort of reread the charges, and then they said, all of the defendants, they've pled guilty to these charges. And then it was like straight gasps in the courtroom. People were like, what? There were people that were already in the courtroom. They were handing out like leaflets, like Free Durk booklets and leaflets, postcards. I even got one right here. I got given like a Free Durk postcard. So I guess I might be team Free Lil Durk now. Shout out to the people that are in there, doing their thing. But there was this absolutely wild moment where the judge said, they all pled guilty. And then it was like, gasp, it was like, what? And then he was like, not guilty, my bad. And he kept it moving. Now look, he was very professional. I don't think that is anything that you could say was going to taint the jury or going to cause any major problems. It was only human. It was a slip of the tongue. But it was like a raucous start. Like, the courtroom gasped. And then when he corrected it, it was like there was sort of like chuckles. People couldn't really believe what was going on, and it was just a crazy start. And like I say, people are in there. They're fighting for Durk's innocence. Look, I'm not gonna lie. There were a few people in there. I didn't get any hate, fortunately, but there were people in there saying how much they hate DJ Academics, saying that he's spreading bad narratives. That they're fighting for justice for Durk. Durk's innocent, and respect to everybody that was there and is giving their opinion across for this. I even actually got an opportunity just now. I hope they don't mind me saying this, but to speak to Big Durk, Durk's father. He said he appreciated some of the positive coverage that I've done. Obviously, I've done some positive, some negative. But as I said to him, I said, look, I really try and cover the positives. I'm not biased. I'm really not trying to be biased. There's bad stuff, there's good stuff. And I said to him, I think he's an inspiration as far as somebody that's, gone through the system, had a life sentence. He's managed to turn things around, got his freedom back, and now he's unfortunately witnessing his son going through the same thing. So utmost respect to Big Durk. Seeing a lot of Durk supporters in the courtroom. I would say the Durk supporters were deep as they've ever been. I've never seen so many Free Durk supporters handing out things. There wasn't a big protest for Free Durk that we heard, but there was real deal support in that courtroom today, and that was just a crazy moment with the judge. So I've got another big update coming for you soon. Okay, so I'm here outside the federal courthouse for day one of the Lil Durk murder for hire trial. And what is really interesting is that jury selection has begun. So let me give you the update on exactly what's going on. We've just had jury selection. Basically, jury selection is now ongoing. It was a packed courtroom. They've got 80 potential jurors. It sounds like that's probably I don't know if I want to say it's unusual, but it sounded like it was kind of on the more heavy side. What's really, really interesting is that obviously they've got so many jurors, they've got so many options, because there's really so much scope for this to go wrong with the jurors. I'm not going to lie. They said straight up to all of the jurors in the courtroom, look, this is about a murder case related to a very well-known rap superstar, like a star. He is a big name. You might have heard of him. All right. They said that they were going to give the jurors a massive questionnaire to try and find out a whole bunch of different things. Now, unfortunately, the media and the public, they're not going to be privy to what's on that questionnaire. So we don't know who's on the witness list. We don't know what was asked on the questionnaire. But what we do know is that it was very big. It was very comprehensive. And apparently what we did hear is that some of the stuff that they are going to be asked is if the jurors are into rap music, if they're into hip hop, what their relationship is with hip hop, what their kind of history is, kind of following this kind of case, this kind of coverage, if they've got any knowledge of the judge, of the lawyers, if there's any backstory that kind of, might make them biased. And they've been given that questionnaire. So I thought it was going to be a longer day today. They ended up ending it after sort of half a day. They've given those instructions to the jury. They've given out those questionnaires, and those jurors are going to come back tomorrow. And then we're basically going to hear from the lawyers. We're going to determine basically whether or not, some of the jurors are going to be excluded. What was really interesting is they said that they're basically, by the end of tomorrow, they need to have turned 80 jurors into 16. Specifically, there's going to be 12 jurors that are, the main jurors, then there's going to be 4 alternates. And what was really fascinating was that they kind of explained some of the backstory as far as, what things they're allowed to find out, what they're not. They're not allowed to get their addresses, but they are allowed to find out, what area they stay in from Los Angeles, what their professions are, who they live with. They said, we need to find out if you guys live with a music executive, if you live with somebody in law enforcement, if you're kind of, just anything along the lines that might make you tainted in this context. And I do have a feeling that there is probably going to be a fight. There's a rumor going around that there were only a handful of black jurors in the jury pool. Now, look, I can't confirm or deny that. I didn't see any of the jurors. I know some people had kind of maybe thought that they'd seen jurors in the hallway. I don't think that can be fully confirmed, so I'm not going to jump the gun on that, and I don't have the information on that. But obviously, you probably have seen that there are rumors going around about the races of the jurors. But at the end of the day, all right, the judge has been very fair. The judge is going to make it very clear what's allowed, what's not allowed. And really, I don't think race has been a really big part of this so far. And I doubt it's going to be going forward. But people are saying that there are some black jurors on the table. And we're going to find out how that develops by tomorrow. All right, I'm here outside the federal courthouse. We just had day one of the Lil Durk trial. It's no longer a hearing. It is now a full-blown trial. It is serious. It's the real deal. All right. There's a few interesting things going on outside the courthouse, inside these rooms. But what was really interesting that I heard today was really the judge giving specific instructions on the gang memberships and what's allowed to be said and what's not allowed to be said. Now, what was really fascinating in the kind of the final pre-trial hearing was that the judge has basically ruled, look, he is very adamant when he gave Durk the big W and severed the two different murder charges, the Vicar count, which is the Chicago murder, the Stephon Mack murder, that's allegedly a gang-related murder. A GD rival of Lil Durk's, who was connected to the people that they say, killed Lil Durk's brother D-Fang. They're basically saying that, okay, that is a gang-related murder. That's separate. All right, we're going to try and put that on the calendar. But this murder, this Los Angeles murder, it wasn't a gang murder. They're saying the act itself wasn't an act of gang violence. What it was that they were basically, trying to get revenge for what happened to King Von. Obviously, the judge made it very, very clear that what is going to be allowed to be discussed is King Von's gang membership, the gang membership between the defendants and co-defendants and co-conspirators. That basically means that they are relevant to each other, like how they know each other from way back being in gangs, the reason and the motivation and the motive for allegedly wanting to King Von because he was such a prominent member of the Black Disciples. But what they're not allowed to do and what they're not allowed to look into and talk about is, the gang reasons. They're not allowed to say that it was a gang-related murder. And what I noticed, and bear in mind, I've looked into this story extensively. I've looked very, very deep into Quando Rondo's gang affiliations, his membership of the Rollin' 60 Crips, but in Savannah, Georgia, these gangs kind of have a lot of different, I don't know the right word, but sets kind of all around the country. And, Quando Rondo's gang membership has never been brought up, and they're not going to be allowed to basically talk about gang membership in context of the murder of Savia Robinson, aka Lil Pab. But what is interesting is the judge said, look, it's up to the jury. If the jury decide based on the testimony that they think Durk and them were all in a gang and were doing gang stuff, that's fine. But that might not necessarily mean that they believe that he did the murder, and vice versa. They can say, he said that, look, the jury might be completely unconvinced that Durk was ever in any kind of gang, but if they're convinced that he orchestrated the murder for hire with his co-conspirators, then they can still find him guilty even if they don't believe that there's any sort of gang membership. So it was a really interesting kind of back and forth. Some of the stuff that's going to be allowed, I think, is going to make a big difference. But I think that is a big key issue that the judge has ruled on, the gang membership, whether they're allowed to talk about that. And again, I feel like that's honestly something that really works in Durk's favor. They're going to allow some of it. Obviously, the government's gang expert is allowed to testify, but he's not allowed to talk about certain things. And I really think that that is leaning more towards being beneficial to Durk. So I will be giving you guys an update as soon as I hear more. Thank you for watching this one. I'm out. So day 2 of the Lil Durk trial, we're going through jury selection. I'm not going to lie, things got off to an insane start. The judge was furious. The judge was very, very, very upset. And I'm going to tell you what happened. And the reason why might surprise you. I don't know if this was in reference to, I don't know who told the judge. I don't know who's telling out here, okay? There might be some people telling in the courtroom on other people in the courtroom. But the judge, basically, one of the first things the judge said, he said, I'm very upset. I'm going to admonish people that were distributing free Durk material. Remember in the last video I showed you these that were going around? These free Durk postcards that were apparently being handed, well, not apparently, I'm telling now, okay? We were in the courtroom and there were people from, supporting Durk. Somebody had a magazine that had printed up like a free Durk magazine. They let other people read it. They weren't giving it out, but they were letting people have a look through it. And they said there'd be more copies available, but they gave out these free Lil Durk postcards, right? I got given a few of these. And I mentioned it in my last video. I don't know how the judge got wind of that. I don't know if other people brought it up, but the judge was furious. He said that he's not happy with people distributing free Durk materials. He said public opinion being disseminated inside of the courtroom is grossly improper. It's out of line. You can't be in there trying to influence people. He said, as Americans, you can have your opinions, you can have your views, you can express them online, but what you can't do is go into a courtroom and lobby for a certain result, or contact a juror, or even the possibility that one of these might have been left behind somewhere that a juror might have seen it was apparently grossly improper. Now, he basically said, look, this is a common sense requirement. I shouldn't even have to tell you this, but this is super out of line. And he said, yo, you guys might be in big trouble for this. He said this is a common sense requirement. He said, if I hear about this going on again, you could be removed from the courtroom and prosecuted for contempt of court. So these folks giving out these free Durk things, I get where your heart is coming from, but like that apparently is improper. You got to stop that, because you actually might be getting prosecuted for that, unfortunately. So free Lil Durk campaign, judge ain't going for it. And what was interesting, before you say he's biased, he did say, he said, look, if Lil Pab's family was doing the same thing, hanging out, cook Lil Durk pamphlets in the courtroom, he said he would be just the same. He said he would be looking at contempt of court. He would be looking at having them removed. Doesn't matter if it's Durk's family, Durk's friends, Lil Pab's family. Doesn't matter if young boy pulls up passing out 4K trade pamphlets, right? It's not proper. It's not allowed. And it was very controversial. The judge was furious. It kicked off on kind of a negative note with that one. So that was crazy. All right, so I'm outside the courthouse. We just heard a very, very crazy update in the courtroom in the Lil Durk trial. It's currently day 2, and we're basically hearing about what's going on with the jury selection. Now, there's a whole bunch of different jurors that have been questioned for different reasons, but one of them was absolutely insane. There were gasps in the courtroom. There was claims that racism was already running rampant amongst the jury. Now, look, I'll tell you what they said, and you can tell me what you think, okay? They basically brought up, the defense brought up the fact that apparently one of the jurors, and I won't say which juror, I won't say the number, anything like that, it doesn't really matter at this stage, but one of the jurors apparently claimed in their questionnaire that by just looking at the defendants, they looked guilty. And then they apparently went on to say, I saw a lot of people die because of people that look like them. Now, there were literally gasps in the courtroom. There was various people that said that's racist. They didn't yell it, but people like, that's racist, like calling it out, saying racist, racism, what the hell? And after that, the judge said something very interesting. Now, I'm sure everybody is going to be reporting about this statement that was made. I don't think the judge was condoning what was said. I don't think the judge was backing the racism in any sort of way. The judge has been very fair and impartial. But what the judge did say is he said, look, I'm not going to disqualify this juror immediately. I'm going to make further inquiries. He said, unfortunately, due to the climate in America and due to the, basically a lot of these opinions and things that are spread around America, a certain way of thinking, he says, unfortunately, he didn't say this, but, he inferred that, maybe due to institutional racism, certain groups, obviously all the defendants in this case were African Americans, certain groups being persecuted. He said, it's very unfortunate and sad, but many Americans do feel like these defendants might look guilty. These defendants might be of a certain background that does have guilt presumed against them. He wasn't condoning it, but he said that he will inquire further. He said that he is going to kind of get to the bottom of it. He's going to ask them about the situation, and they very well may be struck off. And he said something along the lines of like, I could basically strike, potentially, depending on how they respond to these questions, I could strike them off and put them on a much more boring civil case. So I don't think that's any kind of punishment, but it sounds like if there's really a racist juror and that they are asked and questioned about their opinions, it's possible that they might come back and say, no, what I meant to say was that, I felt like I could be impartial because I've been convinced from years of brainwashing that, African Americans are more likely to commit crime due to the racist reporting that's been made for years and the ignorance that spread through society. They might be allowed to stay. That would be crazy. It did sound like racism. Everybody in the court called it out as racism, and it was shocking. It was absolutely, people were aghast in the courtroom. So if that juror is allowed in, it definitely raises some questions. But to be honest, making statements like that, the judge has been very fair and responsible in the way that he's talked about things. But I'm not going to lie, it sounds like that juror's cooked, in my opinion. All right, so I'm outside the courthouse. It is now officially day 2 of the Lil Durk trial, and we're going through jury selection. We just heard some really interesting stuff about different jurors, different people that are being put across, and there was a very interesting exchange between the judge and Dee Dee's lawyer. Now, Dee Dee's lawyer has been very vocal over the last few sessions. Obviously, he is separate to the, alleged dream team of Drew Findling, Brian Steele that Durk's putting forward, and it seems like on a lot of motions, all the lawyers are going to be joined up unless they disagree or they opt out of being included in each other's motions. But Dee Dee's lawyer has really been going hard for Dee Dee separately, and he asked a lot of interesting questions, and he kind of followed up on this very controversial issue of whether this, gang evidence is being allowed to brought up, whether the jury is going to be allowed to be asked about the gang connections, things like that. And what was really interesting is that he had a little bit of a tense back and forth with the government, basically asking, look, is the connection, basically he was like, look, the court hasn't authorized gang info. Are we really even allowed to ask them about their thoughts on gang situations and, the role that gangs are or aren't allowed to play in this trial? Obviously, it's been very controversial, but the judge has made it clear this is not a gang case, it's not a gang murder. He's going to allow only limited discussion of gangs, specifically limited to, the motive of King Von being allegedly a very senior ranking member of the Black Disciples, and the motive for revenge being avenging King Von, who was allegedly a prolific gangster in the Black Disciples, but that the murder wasn't necessarily gang related. They weren't at war with the Rolling 60s in Savannah, Georgia that Quando's a member of, and the gang membership being a tie between the different members of OTF, and how they'd grown up in gangs, how they knew each other. The judge made a very interesting metaphor, which was a little bit spicy, but also it kind of made everybody understand exactly what was going on. And this received a few little gasps and tuts in the courtroom. A few people were like, so he basically said, look, gang's going to be allowed to be discussed in terms of the connection between the defendants and the motive for avenging Von. He said, look, it's being alleged that OTF is a gang. And I allowed the discussion of OTF as a gang to be discussed in February. There's debate about whether this is a musical collective or a gang. He said that basically King Von's membership of OTF and a leader in the Black Disciples, that is what makes there to be an expectation of revenge. And then what he said next was crazy, I'm not going to lie. He said, look, there wouldn't be the same expectation of revenge for Von if rather than OTF they were all in the Boy Scouts, or if they were a chapter of the NAACP. Now, some people were kind of offended by maybe the reference of that organization in this context, but I got the point that he was making. He was basically saying, look, if OTF was, only the Boy Scouts, they probably wouldn't expect the revenge, a brutal, broad daylight murder in revenge for the murder of a member of the Boy Scouts. So they said that the government can use the gang affiliations to argue that there's a greater expectation of revenge. I don't know if the Boy Scouts are really sliding like that. I'm nearly falling into this pond here. That's crazy. But anyway, that is the latest. So I'm outside the courthouse. It's day 2 of the Durk trial, and we've got some more interesting updates on some of the potential jurors. Now, it might be some good news for Durk, because it sounds like there are actually couple Durk fans potentially amongst the jury. There was a reference to one juror who had apparently answered the questionnaire saying that they had admitted that they had actually looked at Lil Durk's Wikipedia page. Now, the judge kind of raised a bit of an eyebrow to that one and said, we're going to have to find out when they looked at Durk's Wikipedia page. If they went home after I told them not to and looked at Durk's Wikipedia page after being told what this trial was all about, that's going to be a problem. But if it just so happens that they had looked at Durk's Wikipedia page previously, then that might be able to run. Now, there was apparently another person who was a bit more familiar with Durk's music, and this could go either way. This could either be really good for Durk, or this could be devastating for Durk. They basically said somebody had actually mentioned that they were aware of one of the bond rulings in the case. They didn't say specifically who, but they were closely enough following the case of Durk to know that either Durk or Dee Dee or any of the guys specifically had been denied a bond. They basically said, look, that's not necessarily indicative of prejudice, but we've got to try and get to the bottom of and find out, exactly what was known. And apparently somebody else actually discussed knowing a lot about the case that actually led up to the murder itself. So I believe one juror actually said that, they had listened to Durk's music in the past, and the judge kind of said, he's not sure if that's going to be relevant. But what was said that was actually pretty crazy is that apparently somebody had said that they were aware, I believe this is more or less what they said, they were aware of the trauma that had led up to the incident. Now, I don't know if that means that they're referring to, Lil Durk's street trauma. Obviously, raps in all of his albums about the street trauma, the horrible things that he went through growing up, the dozens of friends that he's lost to the streets, or if that's specifically referring to the death of King Von and basically how, the trauma of losing King Von and D-Thang might have led Durk to do these things. Now, all of these jurors, they're going to be questioned further. There's going to be kind of more interrogation as to what they actually know very soon. I don't know if we're going to hear from the jurors themselves or if questions are going to be asked privately and then the judge is going to reveal that to the courtroom. But I'll be sure to let you guys know as soon as I hear an update. And there's one more thing that I've got to let you know about that's pretty crazy that went down in the courtroom. All right, folks, so I'm here back outside the courthouse for the Lil Durk trial, day number 2, and we've got a very big, a very interesting update about the alleged racist juror. Obviously, you might have seen the previous video I did or some other reporting going around that apparently there was a juror that was apparently, I don't want to say openly racist, but they were saying some things that could definitely be interpreted as being racist. Specifically, they were saying that the defendants looked like they could have did it. They were saying that they looked like the sort of people that kill people. Some pretty intense stuff that was apparently being said. And it is now official. That juror has been dismissed. Now, it was very interesting. It wasn't surprising. I think this judge is extremely fair, extremely balanced in the way that he's been going about things. Honestly, I've just got to tip my hat because he didn't have a knee-jerk reaction when that information was brought up by the defense. He didn't immediately scramble to sort it. He said that he was going to talk with them. He was going to look into it closer. Clearly, he did do his due diligence. And the result of that is that juror has been dismissed. And he said something very interesting. He came back after the break, after announcing that would be the case. He thanked the jury and he said something really interesting. He basically said, look, thank you for the jury. Thank you for being so honest in the questionnaire. He said, to be honest, you guys were so honest. Sometimes you guys volunteered some things that maybe weren't called for. And I think that was a reference to some of those things that were said previously. So I think it is great news. Everyone was happy. There was kind of like a certain degree of relief, I would say, going on around court when that news was announced. And I think it's only right. Those sort of biases don't really have any place in this kind of trial, in this kind of situation. I think the judge has been very fair. I think he's made really great decisions. And I don't think anyone can really fault him so far, other than, just one awkward slip of the tongue at the start of this that really doesn't affect anything. So mad respect to the judge. He's doing a really great job. There's been some kind of confidential discussions going on in a sidebar that we've not really been privy to. So yeah, we're all just kind of waiting for an update. We're waiting for more information. There have been a number of other jurors that have been disqualified. I won't give you their numbers or anything like that. I don't want to even be anything remotely close to identifying any jurors, but what I will say is that a handful of jurors, about 4 or 5 different jurors, have been dismissed. They didn't really give us specific reasons for those, but they did let us know that particularly controversial juror has been released. All right, and yeah, we're going to be finding out some more information, so I'll keep you guys updated. I haven't really heard anything else other than that big update, and then they've been having a confidential conversation. It sounds like there's kind of something quite sensitive in one of the jurors' pasts that is coming up that they wanted to speak to the judge confidentially about in a sidebar, and it seemed like they had quite a long discussion about that. So that's the latest update from court. I will give you guys some more information as soon as I have it, but for now, that is everything on day 2 of the Lil Durk trial. It's interesting so far. It is official. The jury selection for the Lil Durk trial has now ended, and it was a very interesting conclusion to what was a pretty fiery day. There was a lot of back and forths about different jurors. Obviously, very controversially, there was what sounded like a potentially racist juror or very biased and sort of ignorant juror that said he kind of didn't like the look of the defendants. Obviously, that person was dismissed pretty quick. We ended up kind of going back and forth, and they did fully complete jury selection. They didn't get to the opening statements or anything like that, but we do have a jury that's selected, and it was very interesting. So I'm going to do a very full, very long, detailed breakdown on my second channel, Trapmore Ross, where I'm going to kind of break down the details of just all of the jurors, not their identifying signals, but like some of the backstory about each person and why they were dismissed. I've got kind of everything here, but I'll kind of very quickly run through. I'm just going to try and speed run it. I'm not going to lie to you. So all the people that got dismissed, there was someone that's their parents was parole officers, someone was a firefighter, someone that found rap offensive, somebody that had done outreach for an attorney's organization, somebody's nephew's boyfriend got hurt by gang violence, someone that looked at Durk's Wikipedia, someone that had was some sort of lawyer or in the legal profession, someone that said they disagreed with the presumption of innocence, somebody that said impartiality is nuanced, someone that had a negative opinion of rap, someone that said their friend had a mishandled case and got off when they shouldn't have, someone that said that the murder was all over social media, someone whose brother was assaulted by a gang, a woman that claimed she was in a gang growing up. All of those people were dismissed. Basically, those are the people we had information on. There were other people whose info we didn't get, but they were dismissed. And then as far as the people that were selected as jurors, I'll be honest, the majority of these people that were selected, we didn't hear any information about. I barely heard a peep out of these folks. There was only 5 people who did actually, 4 people that made it onto the jury and 1 person that was an alternate that we'd heard any information about. So 4 of the people that did make it onto the jury, the background was one of them had actually served on 2 other juries, a money laundering case and a criminal case that was undisclosed, and they actually said that they enjoyed being a juror, but there wasn't any sort of bias that it seemed to be. There was another one who, I'm not even going to say what was said, but they basically just said that they lived in a specific area of Los Angeles. I don't know if it's the nicest area, but that's all we knew. There was another person who basically said, they said that they forgot that they wrote that they presume people are not innocent until proven guilty, but they were pressed on that and they said, oh, it's my bad, like, it was an accident, I didn't mean to do that. Someone else had accidentally said in response to a question that they were uncomfortable with some of the issues at trial. When they were asked, they were like, oh, that was a mistake, I meant to say I'm comfortable. So they were allowed in. And then there was only one alternate who we had information on, and that was somebody who that they claimed didn't speak very good English. They were allowed in as an alternate. Everybody else we don't have the information on, but it seems like the really, really questionable people, they were dismissed pretty quickly, judged very fair on both sides. So we got the jury, and it looks like things will be proceeding ahead with opening statements on the next court date. Opening statements have now officially taken place in the Lil Durk trial. It's now officially day 3, and there was some very, very interesting updates. So the first thing I'm going to tell you guys about is the prosecution's opening statement. They started extremely strong, and I'm not going to lie, they had a bunch of evidence that they already showed simply in their opening statement that hadn't been seen before. They basically are making it very, very clear this is all about King Von, it's all about revenge for Von, slide for Von. They showed still images of, you know, the fight between Quando, Rondo, and Von that led to Von's death. They talked about, you know, the plans to stalk Quando, Rondo all across the country to try and kill him multiple times. They didn't show footage, but they showed still images that apparently showed the first time they tried to kill Quando, Rondo all the way back in like 2021 and that situation. So that was kind of interesting. They basically, from there, they went on to show multiple angles of the footage of the murder of Lil Pab. They actually did eventually later on during testimony, which I'll tell you more about in a minute, show full-blown 4K footage of the Lil Pab murder. Straight up 4K, you could see they had ski masks on, you could damn near see their eyes crystal clear. It was pretty tough evidence, but what was really shocking is they made it very clear OTF Jam was one of the shooters in the Lil Pab murder. He is willing to testify. He's killed multiple people, and he is now working with the government, and he is going to explain that he is one of Durk's hitmen. He was contracted to come out there and try and kill Quando Rondo that resulted in Lil Pab's death, and basically he is going to be working with the government. They also confirmed that Vonnie was basically Lil Durk's personal assistant. He was with him for everything, with him constantly, all kinds of stuff that they were doing, and he basically helped organize and orchestrate the whole thing while Lil Durk was chilling in a luxury property. One of the crazy things that they brought up during that was the fact that apparently the stolen car that they were using to slide around LA, the BMW that apparently Vonnie was driving, it had a tracker in it, and they tracked it to the murder, to the In-N-Out, and back to the house that Durk was staying in. That was very, very bad. So all of that really wasn't sounding too good. It was quite a lot of stuff, quite a lot of evidence, and we're really just at the tip of the iceberg with this stuff. So I would say that the prosecution's opening statement was very strong. They basically explained all the different people that they had helping them out. So they've basically got 3 trusted OTF lieutenants that are expected to take the stand. The government have got a whole bunch of evidence. They've got footage, they've got lyrics, they've got music videos. They showed stills of some of the music videos that they're going to be showing, and it's a lot that they've got. So I feel like the prosecution's opening statement was very strong. I'm going to do another video telling you all about the defense's opening statement, and to be honest, Durk's strategy really caught me by surprise. I don't know if it's going to work, but it definitely wasn't the defense that a lot of you guys were expecting, and I think it's going to blow your mind. So stay tuned. I'm going to do another video updating you on Durk's defense and what he's saying, and honestly, you're going to be shocked. Man, so the feds just revealed something about Lil Durk that had never been heard before. Now, there was all these rumors that Lil Durk was trying to flee the country when his homeboys started getting arrested. They're saying he tried to get on a private jet. He was booking all different kinds of flights and going on the run. He's denied this, but we now heard for the first time, allegedly, according to the prosecutors, this blew my mind. Not only was Lil Durk trying to flee the country before he could be charged in the murder for hire for Lil Pab, but apparently, this is crazy. They're saying that when he arrived to the Clearport, the private airport where he was trying to get on a private jet to flee the country, he said that he saw the FBI there and he tried to run from the FBI and escape the FBI at the airport. And then he said when they finally closed him off and boxed him in and stopped him, Bruh, they said that he refused to get out the car. They're saying Smirk was holding himself, barricaded himself in the car. Basically, he wouldn't get out the car. He didn't want to get out for law enforcement. It was crazy. I never heard that before. It sounds to me like he was trying to get out of here. Obviously, the defense, they're claiming the other side. They're saying, no, you know, look, what was really interesting was when the defense addressed this, they didn't outright deny it. They said, look, he was looking to get out the country. He wasn't going to run. He's internationally famous. He was just trying to get out the way. I think they said specifically, the way they phrased it, they said, look, he wasn't trying to flee the feds. He was just trying to get some space. He was just trying to get some space. Apparently, he was just trying to get some space when he went to the airport. Trying to get some space when he was trying to get some space from the feds to get away from them. He was trying to get some space when he refused to get out the car when the feds boxed him in. So, hey, I think we might actually end up seeing eventually some body cam footage from the arrest when they caught him at the airport. I don't know for sure, but obviously I'm very interested to see that. I think the fact that somebody would try and flee definitely does add an interesting dimension to the proceedings. But I'll let you guys know as soon as I hear. There's a lot of other stuff, and I'm going to break down Durk's defense that his team put forward in their opening statement that was very interesting, very unexpected. So I'm going to update you guys on that as soon as I possibly can. But there has been an insane amount of updates. It's been back to back to back in court today, both opening statements, and we're now on the witnesses. It's wild. I cannot believe what Lil Durk's defense is. We have just heard his defense make their opening statements, and I'm not going to lie, I'm absolutely floored. You know what they're trying to do? They're blaming it all on Vonnie. Now, I don't know if people are going to go as far as to say that he telling on Vonnie, but he basically is blaming everything on Vonnie. They're basically making this whole case. They showed the entire opening statement, right? Bear in mind that the prosecution, they showed various pictures, videos, still images of multiple attempts on Quando's life, the actual murder of Lil Pab, the footage of that, footage from Durk's music videos, footage from apparently still images of them when they tried to kill Quando in Waycross, Georgia. It was a whole presentation. When the defense were up there, they basically showed only a couple pictures, and the one picture they showed the whole time was just a picture of Vonnie with King Von. They said it's all Vonnie. Vonnie was King Von's cousin. They said his nickname was Cuz because he was King Von's cousin. His whole identity was based around the fact that he was King Von's cousin, and he was the only one pushing slide for Von. They're all literally directly pointing the finger at Vonnie, saying Vonnie did it. Vonnie's admitting to the government that he did it. He's turned snitch to try and save himself. Durk had nothing to do with it. They're saying that Vonnie had the most to gain by sliding for Von. They're saying that Vonnie was the guy that was driving the Hellcat away from the scene when King Von got shot. They're saying Vonnie tried to speed King Von to the hospital the day that he died. They down there said Vonnie was holding King Von in his arms, telling him he loved him before he took him to the hospital the last time they ever spoke. They basically said that it was Vonnie that has the motivation to slide. It was all Vonnie's idea. Vonnie was organizing everything. Vonnie got the guns, Vonnie got the cars, Vonnie got the sliders, Vonnie got the killers. He did everything, and Durk did nothing. They're blaming it all on Vonnie. I couldn't believe it. Now look, I'm not sure what people are going to categorize this as. I mean, is it telling if somebody is already cooperating with the state against you? Is there such thing as reverse telling? Can you tell back? If somebody works with the state and tells on you, can you tell back? But basically, Durk and his team are making it very clear it was all Vonnie. He's saying it's all Vonnie. Apparently, when they arrested Vonnie, he was staying in a suite at a hotel in Chicago with his girlfriend. He said the cops busted into the suite and arrested him. And the defense is saying, when the cops interviewed him, they basically said, you're the leader until you put someone else in charge. You're the one that was in charge of all of this. They were saying Vonnie and King Von go back decades. Their fathers were friends. Their dads just went back years. Vonnie was, doing personal shopping for King Von. They even said, Vonnie was so locked in with King Von, they had a shared bank account. He was managing all of his money. That was his closest guy. Bro, they even said, I don't know how true this is, but they said that when King Von died and he was in the car on the way to the hospital, he said to Vonnie, why did you let me get shot? Why didn't you do something? And they're saying that devastated Vonnie. He couldn't save King Von, and basically he planned to slide for Von that night. Nothing. They saying Durk didn't do nothing. It was all Vonnie. I don't know if that's going to be believed, but that's the defense. It's insane. Man, we just saw some really horrific evidence in the Lil Durk murder case. I'm not going to lie to you. What the prosecution just showed sent chills down the spines of the jurors. I'm not going to lie to you. They played the 911 call of a woman that actually witnessed the murder of Lil Pab in Beverly Hills at the Beverly Center. Basically explained that, it was a frantic 911 call. She said, oh my God, I can't believe it. Someone's shooting a machine gun. Somebody's been hit. I'm in Beverly Hills. I can't believe this. And then they're saying, where are you? What's going on? What do they look like? She said, I don't want to be involved. I don't want to say anything. I don't want you to have my information. She was scared. These guys, whoever did this, struck fear into the residents and the visitors of Beverly Hills, outside the Beverly Center. That was harrowing on its own. They then played unseen video footage of the murder of Lil Pab. Straight up 2 camera angles, one that we've never seen before. One of them was straight up 4K, crystal clear. You could damn near see the sweat dripping from their heads to down their eyes in front of the ski masks. It was so clear what was going on. It was over in 2 seconds. Like, the doors open, somebody's pumping gas. They basically pop out from the alleyway, from the car, all start shooting, shoot off the switches, automatic gunfire. There's no audio, but obviously we know it's automatic gunfire. And then, very tragically, everyone just jumps in the car, dips off, and slides away. They haven't shown the TMZ clip of Quando screaming no, but they went even further. They showed the body cam footage of the person that pulled Lil Pab's body out of the car, and it was just horrific. He's in the car, you can hear him sort of taking his last dying breaths and moaning. It's really tragic. I'm so sad that Pab's family had to see that. They were in the courtroom and they were distraught over seeing this. That was then accompanied, obviously, the body cam footage picked up that moment of Quando screaming no from a different perspective. It was just so much more chilling to see what Pab was going through, what was going on inside that car. We even saw the images of them at the Bathing Ape store before. They actually told us what hotel that they were staying at before it all went down. It was crazy. But even more tragic, then they had the medical examiner up there on the stand, basically showing the autopsy. It was just one autopsy photo, but it basically confirmed that Lil Pab was actually found with a bullet in his heart. He had punctured lung, it punctured his heart. He also had a bullet that was lodged in his bicep and another bullet that went through his bicep that came out the other side. It was just really horrific stuff. And interestingly, there was no cross-examination from the defense. The 911 call was played and the call operator, no cross-examination from the defense. The only person that brought anything up was Lindsay's lawyer, who basically asked the defense, who asked the detective, like, was there any DNA, was there any evidence that was connected to my client? And that wasn't the case. So it was very interesting, just really harrowing stuff. And I'm sure the jurors were shocked by what they saw. Everybody in the courtroom was shocked. It was just horrific. Rest in peace to Lil Pab. I'm really being impartial about this situation. I hope that it's a fair trial, and I hope that whoever did this is brought to justice if it can be proven, but it's just so sad to see. All right, I'm outside the courthouse. We just got a very crazy update about some stuff that OTF Jam's going to say. And while I'm doing all this, we got the Free Durk Brigade out here. They're doing a little protest. I'm probably going to go and talk to them at some point soon. But I need to give you guys an update first, because apparently a new group chat is being introduced last minute. The defense are livid that this is being introduced. And basically this follows on from Jam apparently getting pressed in a bathroom at a music video shoot for The Block Is Hot. Apparently they're saying that Durk and others followed him into the bathroom and had a conversation with him about, they were saying that he was involved in another murder in another situation, and that they was basically, making it hot for OTF. Apparently it's been alleged that, someone might have said to him in that interaction that they should get out of town. And then after all of that, Jam basically said that he texted a group chat that Durk was in saying he's noticed that he's been getting cut out since that day. And obviously we've heard testimony that Jam was apparently saying some stuff like, he was in group chats and they were saying, yeah, blood's about to snitch, clear as day. So Jam apparently knew that OTF were turning on him. And he said that, like, hey, ever since that day, I know guys been acting different around me. Apparently Durk replied, look, I get it, but we can't do the Fed's job for them. We got to let them do their jobs. Basically low-key hinting that he knows that he's telling, but trying to downplay the situation. And then from there, apparently Jam said, I'll lay it out, gang. MS acting scared to be around me. Guys act like they don't F with me since that day when he got pressed in the bathroom. Apparently Durk told him, I'm with you 1,000%. Use your head. We ain't helping them people do their job. And then Jam basically said, I got you on my son. And then apparently there was another crazy back and forth where Jam was apparently in response to this whole thing with Lamron Richo and what was going on with all of that. I'm seeing something crazy going on behind me, I ain't gonna lie. But basically, like, Jam was basically offering, when Durk said, hey, I got him out, multiple ski masks hunting you, blood. Like, he was saying that to Lamron Richo. Apparently Jam offered and basically said, hey, I'm down to hunt them. I just need a couple cars to get the job done. He said, I need a few cars to squash the beef with them. Apparently Durk doesn't reply. Jam then replies to a Durk story post where he's sharing some of his music. He replies saying drop, and Durk says, I'm ready on Pluto. Now the defense are saying that the feds are trying to make it look like that, Jam was saying, drop me them sliders. Durk's ready to slide on Pluto, but they're saying, no, he's talking about music. They're saying there's another message they're trying to say is incriminating, but he's really talking about a celebrity boxing match. Everybody's anticipating this Jam testimony being absolutely crazy. I think it is going to be absolutely crazy when it does happen, but even before we get to it, the feds, the prosecutors, the defense, they're all arguing about these kind of alleged messages. And hey, if that's what we got from Jam when he hits the stand, I think it's going to be crazy. But that's the latest update. But literally, I'm out here. I'm seeing Doody Low out here. I'm seeing Big Durk. I might need to go and see what's going on, man. People talking about I got a couple fades lined up or something. But you know what I'm saying? I'm out here just doing my best. Okay, so one of the craziest things that we heard in court today really blew my mind. There is a whole bunch of evidence when it comes to these stalking charges in Lil Durk. Now, I could not believe this, okay, but a lot of stuff is being tied around this BMW that apparently Vonnie was driving around to various locations. What is so insane is that they're saying Durk had a house in Los Angeles. They're saying that Durk basically was like, you know, he was living in a house in Los Angeles, $35,000 a month crib that he had for a certain period of time. Vonnie was his assistant. Apparently, they basically had the BMW already rented from some exotic car rental place. And Vonnie was driving the car around. He had driven the car, left it at Durk's house. They went to Miami for a day right before all of the hitmen came to town on the 18th. They're saying that Vonnie got back in the BMW. They went and got another slider. These guys were all sliding around together. It had a GPS tracker in it the whole time. Obviously, the hit went down, and they're saying that BMW that Vonnie was driving, it went from, I cannot believe it. It went from Durk's house to Quando's hotel. They're camping out at night until 1 a.m. outside Quando's hotel. It then went to it's crazy. It then went back to Durk's house overnight, and then the next day when they went to do the hit, it turned up at Quando's hotel, turned up at the Bathing Ape store where Quando went to. It turned up immediately after that at the dispensary that Quando went to. It then was 2 blocks away when the murder was carried out and Savia Robinson, Lil Pab, was killed. It then went to In-N-Out where all the hitmen all linked up, and it then went back to Durk's house. I'm sorry, but that's going to be pretty tough. That's going to be pretty tough to answer for, all right? They're going to say that Durk is, you know, not blaming Durk's blaming this whole thing on Vonnie, right? And so he's going to have to basically explain that Vonnie was out hunting people, going back and forth from Durk's house, going on a trip to Miami with Durk, leaving the BMW at his house, coming back to it, then taking it to basically do surveillance for this hit. And they're really going to argue that Durk didn't know none of what was going on. I think that's a tall order, but we're going to have to wait and see. But that, I'm not going to lie, that one really blew my mind. That one was crazy. Like the BMW, it was going from scene to scene to scene to Durk's house and being left overnight. And it was tracked. But you want to know the craziest thing? You want to know the dumbest thing? The detective said that they went to the exotic car rental place where that BMW was rented from. They said, did you see anything interesting at the rental spot? They said, yeah. We went in there and they had a framed picture of the owner with Lil Durk. Thinking, what the hell? They're saying that Lil Durk had a framed picture with the owner of the spot where the murder car was rented, and it had been stored at his house numerous times in between the surveillance and the hit and afterwards. That's just a really bad look. So another thing that came out in court today that was very interesting was to do with the flights. Now, interestingly enough, okay, they said that Lil Durk had an Amex account that had 4 different people with different credit cards under it. One of them was kind of like somebody that worked for him. Somebody was sort of like a business manager. One of them was his father and him. Now, they weren't booked on his specific card, but they were booked on one of the cards that belonged to one of the people that worked for him. All of the flights of all the hitmen was booked on Lil Durk's Amex account by a card that wasn't in his name, but it was a Amex account. His company isn't called OTF. It's got a different name. I won't reveal that name to you now, but it's got a name that you might expect for like, you know, a music company to kind of have, all right? It doesn't explicitly state what he's doing, but it's something sounds. It's obviously a musical company. Now, what's super messed up about this is literally they showed the Amex bank statements, and it showed the name of the person on the flight, where the flight was going to, the price, just all the details, when the flight was scheduled to happen, all on his Amex statement, all right? I didn't know they had that much interest. I ain't got an Amex, so I don't know, all right? I don't do crime, but, you know, I guess it's a bit of a thing. But what was interesting was that they kind of leaked a few other pieces of information. They showed off his Amex card, so not only was that month the hitters' flights booked on that Amex account, but we also ended up seeing something very interesting. That month, he had apparently spent $150,000 plus on that one Amex account. And apparently he spent $6,700 in Amiri that month. He'd spent $3,000 in Neiman Marcus. And there were a bunch of other little small transactions that I guess all added up to a lot. But those were a couple of really big transactions that stood out. So he out here balling out, getting fits, you know what I'm saying, getting fly, getting dressed. They were going on private jets. They were taking a private jet from LA to Miami the day before the murders, or the day before the stalking actually started taking place. And it was just a lot of information was put across there. And obviously he allegedly said in a message, you know, don't book nothing on no flights connected to me. And unfortunately it seems like that advice wasn't followed. Now the defense said in their opening statement that they kind of like were planning to, you know, say, well, he said don't book no flights in relation to me, but they were actually booked, you know, in relation to him. So there ain't really nothing to hide. Well, it's kind of like, well, is that because there was nothing to hide, or was that because they was kind of dumb and they didn't do what they was told to do to book the flights on someone else's name? But we saw all of them flights on the statements. Not really a great look, to be honest. So one of the most ridiculous things that came up in court today is apparently the hitmen that were sent on the, you know, mission to murder Quando Rondo that ended up killing his cousin, Lil Pab Savaya Robinson. They really did one of the silliest things I've ever seen. So they actually went out there and committed this murder. They bought ski masks from, it's an American store, it's REI or Ray or Rye. I'm not familiar with it, but it's like a sporting goods store. So they went and bought 4 ski masks. Vonnie was sent to go and buy 4 ski masks from that store. They then, you know, allegedly went on this hit. They wore ski masks and, you know, all black outfits. But interestingly enough, after that, we ended up seeing, you know, this story that they had, like, you know, changed the top half of their outfits, but they had then gone to In-N-Out Burger wearing the same shoes, pretty distinctive shoes. Like, they looked to me like, you know, various different eras of Jordans in different colors. One had a pair of black shoes on with white details, one had a pair of red shoes on, one had a pair of gray shoes on, and they were all very, very distinctive. Any sneakerhead would have been able to identify these specific types of sneaker. And it's kind of ridiculous that they would do this hit, be caught on the surveillance footage in the hit. And we saw side-by-side images basically showing the guys that were like on the hit with the ski masks on. We saw the ski masks that had been purchased by Vonnie at the sporting goods store. We then saw images of them all with their faces out in In-N-Out Burger with the same shoes on as they wore in the hit 40 minutes earlier. But what really killed me, and this one is crazy, I gotta give it to them, the detectives went ham on this case. And this is the biggest irony you will ever hear today. Apparently OTF Jam, he did the hit in a pair of sweatpants, all right? And it said, rats before riches. Rats before riches. Now that don't really make too much sense. I'm guessing it means you got to go through people ratting on you before you get to your riches. But it's like, he wore these pants that said rats before riches. You know what the detectives did? He was wearing those. This is so crazy because he ended up becoming a cooperator. But he was wearing those during the hit. He then wore them to In-N-Out after the hit. And the detectives said that there was only 2 stores that sold these pants. They're in Southside Chicago. And then they then went there and said, who's shopped here? Who bought these pants from here? They said it was OTF DD. They said it was DD had gone there and kitted out the killers with a bunch of merch that you can only get in Southside Chicago. After that led to the subpoenas, Instagram accounts being taken over. It was just an absolute mess. But really, you could argue that it was the sneakers that got the guys caught. You know, then you got the GPS data of the, you know, of the cars, the license plates, the fake tags. But bro, they really showed them wearing an assortment of different Jordans in different colors at the hit, ski masks on, and then at a restaurant. Same pants. One of them had a ripped, like you get the ripped jeans with a rip in the knee. Still had those on. Jam had the rats before riches on. It was just like insane. Why would you do a hit in those same outfits? All right, so I'm back at the courthouse. Allegedly, OTF Jam is going to be testifying today. It's going to be crazy. Now look, for me, I'm very, very excited to see him go up against Brian Steele. We obviously saw Brian Steele going absolutely crazy against YSL Woody in the whole, you know, YSL Rico trial. It was absolutely wild. Realistically, YSL Woody being an unreliable witness and getting his credibility trashed, mainly by Brian Steele and his team, is what basically saved Young Thug. I've always said it, I've said it numerous times, even though people don't like me saying it, that YSL Woody saved Young Thug. Young Thug wouldn't be out here in the world walking around free with a tank top on, you know what I'm saying, talking about this person's a rat, that person's a rat, if it wasn't YSL Woody. King Rat, all right? And YSL Woody don't like me, but it is what it is, man. We just being honest about what's going on out here in the public space. So, allegedly, Jam is going to be testifying today. I'm hearing that it is going to be absolutely wild. This might be the craziest day of the whole trial. I don't know how long it's going to go on for. I would think that he's got to be up there a while because he's basically the star witness. And I don't think that there's really any other way that they can, you know, take this case all the way without Jam's support. So I'm very curious. I know there's a lot of people mad at me today about the whole thing yesterday with, you know, Durk blaming everything on Vonnie. I might do a quick little update about that in a minute. But at the end of the day, don't get mad at me. Facts don't care about your feelings. At the end of the day, That is what happened, all right? There was a whole bunch of stuff put on Vonnie, and, you know, Jam is basically going to add to it. Vonnie's going to take the stand eventually. And look, I do agree with a lot of what people are saying. You know, Durk's doing what he's supposed to do. If Vonnie is completely copping to all the crimes and organising everything, he got to point the finger back at him. It would be dumb for him to, you know, stay solid and say, oh, I don't know, I'm not going to put anything on Vonnie, but I don't know what happened. That would be dumb. That wouldn't be such a good defense. It wouldn't get him anywhere. So it is what it is, man. But everybody's anticipating a wild day of testimony from OTF Jam. It is going to be wild. We heard some crazy details about him, you know, sending some text messages and offering to slide and stuff like that. And yeah, just absolutely crazy. I'll see you with an update. So look, I want to give you guys another update following on from yesterday. I never said that Lil Durk's a snitch, but what I did say is that he's blaming everything on Vonnie. I'm sticking by that. I know a lot of people are kind of out here basically like doing a little performance, just trying to, you know, come up with the best way that they can ignore the facts and twist the facts to try and defend Durk and, you know, placate the Free Durk crowd. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just here reporting the facts to you. And look, I don't think that Durk's snitching. I don't think Durk's lawyers are snitching. I don't think it qualifies as snitching. I'm not someone who even cares about snitching. But what I do want to say that was crazy that nobody else is talking about was that when Didi's lawyer had his opportunity to speak in the opening statement, and it was said that basically, you know, anything that the other lawyers say, unless people opt out of it, unless Brian Steele and Drew Findlay opt out of what Didi or Lindsay's lawyer are saying, they all agree with it. So in the opening statement, Didi's lawyer said that Vonnie was a sophisticated criminal that was part of an international car theft ring, and he had ties to the cartel. Now look, I don't think nothing is snitching. At the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do. But they're talking about, hey, Vonnie has got ties to the cartel. Now I ain't heard about no ties to the cartel until that. They're putting stuff on Vonnie that I hadn't heard before. Now I would love to know what the evidence is that Vonnie has ties to the cartel. Is that something that Vonnie said? Is that something that Durk and Didi's lawyers dug up? I didn't hear any protest from, you know, any of Durk's main lawyers that they didn't want to be part of this information being included in the opening statement that Vonnie was tapped in with the cartels. So look, I don't know what all of that means, but they are blaming everything on Vonnie. That is an absolute fact. People are just super in their feelings because they're not hearing what they want to hear. But I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. All these other guys, take note, all of these other guys that are just telling you what you want to hear, they're just capping. They're listening to what's going on in the courtroom and they're thinking, like, how can I twist this to tell people what they want to hear? They're trying to get clicks. They're trying to get views. They're basically trying to twist the facts to just feed people the slop they want to hear. I'm not doing that, all right? I've been here being factual with you guys every day. When I told everyone that Durk took a W when they severed the charges, everyone was gassed. They were overjoyed. They were loving me. Suddenly, Durk fans love me, all right? And now I'm telling you the truth that he's blaming everything on Vonnie, which is exactly what happened. Now you're all mad. Now you're all salty. I'm hearing people saying, oh, you should be banned from the courtroom, all of this nonsense. Well, look, I'm just being honest. You ain't going to find as honest of a take anywhere else as you will on my page. So stay locked in. I'll be back. I'm going to be posting more on X today because it's kind of hard to get in and out of the courtroom. So what I'm probably going to do is just, pop out during the breaks, make quick X posts so I don't have to leave the courthouse. Then in the full-blown lunch breaks, I'll be out doing the long video for my main channel, or my second channel, Trapmore Ross, and these little quick updates here. So I appreciate you guys, and I will see you in there. All right, so I'm out here outside the courthouse. We got a whole bunch of friends. We made new friends. We made haters along the way, man. There's a whole lot going on out here. But what is going on is that there was some new testimony. The lead detective on the case has been testifying. They gave some more information. We ended yesterday after we kind of heard all of the updates about, we saw the surveillance footage inside the gas station convenience store. We saw the shooting as it happened. But this time we saw a whole bunch of extra stuff. And really, we heard a lot about the cars, all right? It was here Durk be talking about we on them cars. Well, apparently they was really on them cars. Now the BMW that Vonnie was driving was hiding 2 blocks away, about 7 minutes walk away, 2 blocks driving from when the murder happened. But what's crazy is we actually heard that it's likely that when Quando Rondo's car fled the scene after the shooting, it might have actually driven right past where Vonnie's BMW was hiding. But you know what's even more crazy? It wasn't entirely clear before exactly what was going on. We know that BMW had gone to and from Durk's house a whole bunch of times, but they revealed Vonnie was trying to be slick. He basically allegedly had driven that BMW, all right, from 2 blocks down the street after seeing Quando Rondo's car go past. He went and parked the BMW somewhere in Hollywood. And you know what he did? He then got an Uber directly to Durk's house from where he left the car, and they know where he left the car. So that's not really a great look, to be honest with you guys. That's not looking too good for Vonnie. So right after that, all right, that's basically what we ended up seeing was everybody linked up at In-N-Out before Vonnie ditched the car. But apparently, quite literally minutes before, as the alleged killers were walking into In-N-Out to go and get a burger, the flights home was suddenly booked. Someone from Durk's team allegedly booked the flights. It was connected to his Amex account, and basically they're saying that the flights were booked and then the killers had it In-N-Out and then they flew back to Chicago, a whole bunch of them together. So that's not really such a great look, all right? It honestly was like pretty intense. I mean, I'm trying to see what else was going on. There was a whole bunch of other interesting stuff, but I'm going to get to it in a different video for you guys. But that's kind of the update on the car. There was a whole bunch of stuff about the car. The cross-examination didn't really yield too much. They tried to say, oh, well, you know, they said at the rental spot, they had a selfie with the guy that runs the rental spot with Durk. They said, well, they had pictures of people with other celebrities, and the detective was just like, I don't remember any of that. And it was like, what were they going to do? Be like, oh, yeah, there was a picture of, you know, I don't know, the rental shop owner with LeBron. Maybe LeBron committed the murder. It's like, yeah, but one of the murder cars didn't end up and go to and from LeBron's house. So it was a little bit of a strange line of questioning. But yeah, they're doing everything they can. And obviously everything's been very controversial since yesterday, that they said, you know, Vonnie was blaming everything on Durk. Durk was blaming everything on Vonnie. So it's definitely getting a little bit messy. There's a couple of really big updates, and we're all anticipating alleged testimony from OTF Jam. So I'll let you know when that happens. Peace. So one of the most intense things that we saw today was a very long and extended look at what was going on inside that In-N-Out burger location after the murder happened. Now, we saw basically, you know, the alleged hitters along with Dee Dee in the In-N-Out, but not only were they in the In-N-Out, they were checking their phones. They were all looking at their phones. At one point, Dee Dee put his arm around Jam and showed him something on his phone. It was ages, and I'm not gonna lie, we saw the whole footage. It was multiple minutes long. It was a long ass time. We basically watched them waiting for their whole order in In-N-Out, and what was seriously crazy about that is the whole time they looking shifty. I'm not gonna lie, they were low-key looking like people that might have just done something they shouldn't have done. The whole time they in In-N-Out, they looking at their phones, they looking over their shoulders, looking around, they kind of looking mad shifty, looking out the windows as if they thinking, yo, I hope the cops don't turn up any second. That was kind of crazy on its own. But then, like, in addition to that, they all on their phones. They're all looking at their phones, sharing things, looking at each other. Jam's talking on the phone for an extended period of time. It looks a little bit like Dee Dee's kind of looking at Jam, sort of like, hey, why are you talking on the phone? But they're all looking at their phones. Everybody was looking at their phones. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, Durk looked pretty pissed off when that was going on. I'll be real with you. I feel like he looked, you know, a little bit upset. He looked frustrated. He kind of grimaced at certain points. And they brought up his Amex records showing the, you know, flights had been booked in his Amex account basically after everyone had had their In-N-Out burger. And he kind of, I noticed like a little bit of a grimace from him. So I'm not going to lie, that In-N-Out footage was definitely not a good look. You know, a bunch of guys that allegedly just did a hit. They're all in the In-N-Out burger wearing the same shoes and the same pants that they were wearing in the footage of the hit. And then they all on their phones. Immediately after that, we were then shown the TMZ clip. Obviously, it's, you know, the same incident where after the shooting, the car kind of pulls over at another gas station in Hollywood, and we hear Quando screaming no as Pav is pulled out from the car. It's really, really sad stuff, that clip that we saw on TMZ. Now, they didn't say this yet, but it did give you the impression that perhaps that was what they were looking at on their phones inside In-N-Out, because they said that the TMZ reporter had been dispatched immediately to the scene after Quando was on the street screaming no. That's how it was all captured on video. There were apparently amateur videographers, TMZ reporters, everybody was all there trying to get their little clip. And it's honestly dark, to be honest with you, to think that somebody gets killed and you know, their friend is screaming no on the side of the street, and people's first thought is to get the camera out and film. TMZ's first thought is to send somebody down there. That's honestly dark. But anyway, it did seem like that might be what they were looking at. And then there was a whole back and forth about this supposed message that Dee Dee had sent tagging Quando Rondo. Now they're saying that actually no, he was just resharing another post, but still didn't look good. And I'll be honest with you, while Dee Dee's lawyers was talking, I feel like Durk's lawyers were looking a bit pissed off, because it was like, you making the block hot right now. But I'll let you know all about that in another video. I'll see you soon. All right, so there's been a lot said about, you know, Durk being cooked and really negative things happening for Durk, but we did see Durk's multi-million dollar, they saying billion-dollar lawyers actually doing cross-examination. And I'm not going to lie to you, they were putting in a good shift. When Brian Steele was up there, he was clapping back at the main detective, and he brought up some very interesting things. He kind of gave us a little taste of what's probably going to come as time goes on. He basically brought up some very interesting points and kind of trashed the credibility of the detectives when it came to actually recording conversations with these alleged cooperators. They said you spoke to cooperators that are going to testify at this trial during the investigation, right? including Jam. He said yes. They said you were present with Jam for 12 different interviews personally. He said, well, I don't know the amount of times, but it was quite a few. They said Jam was interviewed over 30 times, right? And the guy was like, possibly. And they said Jam is in confinement. They take notes. Do they record the meetings? They said, well, how come Jam only had 3 recorded meetings? So they're sitting down with him 30 times, only recording 3 of them. Now that kind of looked bad. Brian Steele was kind of putting in work on the detective at this point. They also went on to say that Keith Jones was doing interviews. They said that this detective, you were present 5 times for interviews with Keith Jones, yes. And they said, but only 1 was recorded. And he said, possibly. And again, this was probably Durk's finest hour over the last few days. Durk's been kind of letting the prosecution do their thing, but Brian Steele took that stand and he was putting in work. I'm not going to lie, he was looking good. This was the strongest I feel like we've seen Durk since that severance hearing. So in addition to that, they also brought up Vonnie. They said Vonnie was interviewed in your presence, that specific detective, 10 times. And they said none of those were recorded. And the detective admitted it. And then Brian Steele started grilling him, saying, do you know why a meeting with a cooperator might not be recorded? Like, why might that happen? And he was like, I can't explain it to you. Even the detective, he was like, I typically record stuff. But, you know, I don't know why we didn't record those. They basically seemed to say that the prosecutors wanted to have the strategy of not recording these interviews. I don't know if they wanted to get them comfortable. We're hearing that a handwritten note by Jam is being presented. But I'll be honest with you, Brian Steele was doing a great job. There's a lot of people out here kind of hating on me, saying that I'm being biased. But I'm here to tell you, Brian Steele, when he was grilling that detective, was doing an amazing job. That was the best we've seen Durk and his team looking in a few days, okay? So I would say that was a small W. I don't know where it's going to lead from here, but I would say that the prosecution have had their time, and now the defense are clapping back, and Brian Steele about to show the world why he really making those millions. All right, so we just heard some really interesting stuff in court about some of the social media posts that were going back and forth all around Lil Durk and the people around him. Now, there were some very, very fascinating posts that were shared. We heard rumors that this was going to be shared, and this is a post that I've talked about in the past before. But if you remember that Instagram comedian from Chicago, Famous Richard, okay, he's known for doing all type of comedy sketches and just being a generally hilarious guy. Well, they brought up his infamous video where he did the Quando Rondo challenge. You know that video that he did, basically recreating the TMZ video that was, basically tragically depicting what happened after the shooting where Quando Rondo was screaming no and Lil Pab was on the ground. Well, that video of Famous Richard doing the Quando Rondo challenge and his whole impression, that got sent around. Apparently someone sent that to Durk, and I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know who would want to send that to Durk. That's a pretty crazy thing. And now look, apparently Durk didn't send that. We didn't hear about a response to that, but whoever sent that to Durk, I don't know, people want to say I'm the police, but who's sending Lil Durk the Famous Richard Quando Rondo challenge? And by the way, while I'm recording, I got the whole Free Durk squad behind me, man. What is going on? The whole Free Smoke squad is behind me, okay? So I guess everybody waiting for an update all at the same time, okay? So we get into the bottom of it. But that was very interesting. We saw a couple of really interesting posts that had gone back and forth. There was basically I ain't gonna lie, academics came up a couple of times. There were a couple of academics posts that apparently Durk had screenshotted. 2 posts that, look, I'm just going to keep it real. Academics, you up in there, man. Durk was locked into your page. He was screenshotting your posts. Apparently, Lil Durk screenshotted the post that academics put up when he reposted the TMZ article about Quando Rondo getting shot at in Waycross, Georgia, back in May 2021. He also screenshotted the academics article that basically said that it's low-key distracting. Look at all these people I got here, man. I've got the whole Free Durk squad behind me. It's so distracting. But Durk screenshotted the image that he sent to academics. Man, I had to check my notes, but the other post, Lil Durk had it screenshotted in his phone. He screenshotted the academics post where academics confirmed that Lil Tim had been arrested for the killing of King Von. Now, we know Lil Tim ended up beating those charges, but this was all part of that phone evidence that they was trying to get thrown out. Unfortunately, that's still been included. They haven't fully cracked the phone yet. But yeah, they're saying Famous Richard challenge, Quando Rondo challenge was on the phone, screenshots of posts from academics was on the phone. It's a lot, okay? But I've got a whole bunch more updates. There are a bunch of back and forths. And just like I said earlier, Brian Steele was doing a very, very good job, doing a lot of objections, definitely doing his thing, pushing for justice and pushing to try and get things, straightened out for Durk. And I got to say, I'm in awe of Brian Steele. Amazing lawyer, doing an amazing job, definitely getting some millions off of this case. So I'm excited to see when he goes up against Jam. Jam didn't testify today. It didn't end up happening. So I'll let you guys know when that happens as soon as it does. But right now, ain't no Jam. So one of the interesting things that came out today was kind of this discussion of, Lil Durk's moves when it came to managing his phone numbers, his privacy. He basically had allegedly 17 different phone numbers between the years of 2018 and 2024. Now we're hearing kind of a lot of different testimony about group chats and how he was conducting himself, what he was doing with his phones. Apparently there was a text thread where he said, yo, I deleted my text today. Dee said you deleted it, and Durk sent a voice message saying, yeah, I delete my text every day. And my whole thread, the wind is blowing my pages. They basically said he deletes his threads every single day. He doesn't want none of these messages on his phone. Now that doesn't prove anything, but it's like very, very interesting that he had 17 phone numbers during that period of time. There was also a lot of talk about some group chats that were being kind of used quite frequently. And there was apparently a very big OTF group chat that had some of the most famous people in OTF. Apparently there was Doody Low, Booney Mo, there was Dee in there. Apparently another well-known OTF member by the name of Wook, Wookaduk from the songs. And then obviously somebody in there apparently called Loyal, and other people who were unidentified. Now, we did hear a little bit of some voice messages from some of these group chats, and they were quite interesting, but we was kind of partway through that testimony and we hadn't quite got to the end of it. But I'm going to do another video kind of telling you a little bit more about some of the messages that Durk was sending back and forth, especially after the death of King Von. Obviously, it was very tragic what happened. And King Von, lost his life too young. There were definitely some things that maybe he was going to answer for if he was still around. But at the same time, no one should go out so young like that. So it clearly affected Durk a lot. And we heard a lot of messages back and forth from exactly what was going down right after Von lost his life, and how it all kind of played out with Durk's mindset at the time. So I'll let you guys know kind of as soon as I can break all of those messages down for you. But yeah, Durk having dozens of phones, different numbers, all kinds of things. And sounding like he was definitely trying to move smart, but unfortunately not everybody in the crew was moving as smart as Durk. All right, so we got a very big update today after everything that kind of went down in court, and one of the biggest updates was really tragic. We heard a lot of the messages that Durk had apparently sent after King Von passed away, and what was really interesting was that, he gave an insight into his mindset, some of the things that he was going through, the way that he was apparently feeling when everything was going on. He said right after, blood, this one got me feeling like Newski. Now, weirdly, the feds basically said, the FBI agent said that they didn't know who Newski was. They kind of was asked, they was like, wait, who's Newski? Who's that? Now, obviously, anybody that's followed this case for a while knows that Newski is Lil Durk's cousin. Now, I don't think the irony is lost on anybody that Quando Rondo's cousin Lil Pab got killed in front of him, and we saw Quando Rondo on the street screaming. No, that's exactly what happened to Lil Durk. There was a throwback video of him going around where he's screaming at the scene of Newski's death, and he arrived to the scene right after it happened. So that was really, really tragic. Durk went on to say in a group chat, I'm dead inside, blood. I feel like I lost one of y'all. This shit real. I can't fall victim. And in another message, it actually sounded like he was basically denying being suicidal because he was so upset about what happened to Von. So the day after that, all right, the day after King Von passed away, one of his people basically followed up with him and said, how you doing? Are you straight? And Durk said, yeah, I'm good. I'm in my feelings, ready to put this shit together. Now, the cops didn't even suggest or infer at that point that was necessarily him talking about, planning the revenge. But it definitely showed that he was in a state of mind and he was looking, to kind of move forward with however he felt about that. Somebody said to Durk, dudes are going to be in their feelings for a while. It ain't easy to get over. Durk said, I know, I ain't letting shit slide. Him dying turned me into a different animal. And basically Durk said, what if that was you? Von would be outside right now. And Durk said, shit got me in my feelings too. And this was really sad to see, but he said, shit sick, but I'm not sending myself off. I can't. I feel like really that was just the tip of the iceberg. We were kind of halfway through hearing a bunch of, messages from Durk's phone and, different group chats. They were talking about there's a big group thread with a bunch of, really well-known OTF members like Booney Mo, Wookaduk, Dee, Doody, Booney Mo, all of those guys. So I don't know what's said in them group chats. We heard a little bit of a voice note. Apparently Durk obviously had, said, I think it was around Christmas Day, he ain't squashing nothing. He ain't ready to squash the beef. You can take a piece of the switch. And he even said in one of them, Quando can die. So he was clearly really affected by the death of Von. Obviously what ended up happening afterwards was very tragic. But I think there's going to be a lot more illuminating things that go on when it comes to the texts and everything like that. So I'll keep you guys updated as soon as I hear more. But that was what we heard today. It was a very, very big day, and there was no sign of OTF jam. I don't know if they delayed it. I don't know if something's going on behind the scenes. There were some private meetings between the lawyers, but we were told the OTF jam testimony would happen today. They said that yesterday, but it never happened. So if it does happen, I'm going to let you know. But that's it from today. All right, so there was a very interesting update today, and they played something in court that I didn't even think existed. Obviously, I've been covering the King Von situation since he was still alive. I was covering King Von's cases, the KI case, the Malcolm Stuckey case, back in 2019 before any of this happened, all right? So I've really been on this case for damn near 7 years at this point. But obviously, the footage of King Von passing away was, extremely big news. There was that surveillance footage. It came out pretty much within 12, probably 20, at least 24 hours, if not 12 hours of Von actually passing away. We know that because it was all over social media, but not only that, all right, people had sent it to Durk, and Durk had even sent the footage of Von's death that was recorded on camera to other people. I guess they're lowering the flag out here right now for some reason. I don't know what that's all about. Did someone pass away? But basically, what ended up being played in court was 4K footage of the King Von death from both angles that had never been seen before. Same footage, but way more detail and longer. Now, what I learned from watching that footage that I had never seen before, Quando Rondo was there hanging out in the area for quite an extended period of time. He was hanging out, he was comfortable, he was good. He didn't know that King Von was right there in the car waiting to hop out and sucker punch him and start a fight with him. But what's really interesting is, in addition to that, we saw just much more detailed 4K footage of King Von running up, completely blindsiding Quando, sucker punching him, swinging on him, going at him hard. And then after that, obviously we saw Lil Tim firing the shots. There's been debate whether you can see the shots fired. Did the police? People have said, oh, the police shot King Von. In this 4K video, you can see the muzzle flash. You can see all the shots that Lil Tim was firing. Looked like about 3 or 4 shots straight into King Von. Obviously, it was King Von. Now, here was some interesting stuff, and I know a few people are going to be upset about this, but I'm just going to keep it real with you guys, okay? King Von wasn't paralyzed. He couldn't stand, but he was moving his legs when they were dragging him to the car. That's a fact. Everyone said he was paralyzed. He was hitting the spine. He wouldn't have been able to walk. If he lived, he'd have been in a wheelchair. Now, I don't know about all that, but he was moving his legs when they got him into the car. And look, I'm just going to keep it real. People aren't going to like this, okay? But Muwop, he appeared for a brief moment to have actually slowed down King Von's journey to the hospital, because everybody bundles in the back of the car that we now know Vonnie was driving the Hellcat. But it seems like Muwop is insisting on being in the car. He's trying to squeeze in the car. It looked like there's already 3 or 4 people in the back row of the car. Muwop's barely fitting in there. They can't close the door. Muwop damn near climbs on top of somebody to get in the car, and then they shut the door. But it's like, the whole escape to the hospital was definitely delayed, not by a long time, but at least a few seconds, because Muwop was trying to force himself into the car. Now, obviously, he was there for King Von. He was the one that punched Quando Rondo and got him off of him. It's no disrespect to Muwop, but it just shows what an awful, chaotic mess that it was. And seeing that in crystal clear federal 4K was a whole different experience. So that was crazy, but there's going to be a lot more that's going to come out soon.